What should you do if you are 8 centimeters and labor is no longer progressing, or if you've been pushing for a really long time and your baby is just having a really hard time getting underneath that pubic bone? In this YouTube video, we're going to break down movements that you can do during your labor to overcome a late labor stall, which means you are later in your labor process and labor is pausing for some reason. This may be related to baby's position, it may be related to space within the pelvis, and we're going to break down movements that you can do to help overcome them. In addition, we're going to break down a few prenatal exercises that you can do to help you prepare for birth to ideally prevent this scenario from happening altogether. And if you want to dive deeper with us, check out our online childbirth education courses in addition to our prenatal fitness programs, where we incorporate a ton of exercises to create more space within your pelvis, to release tension within your pelvic floor, and to support your baby's position, not only for a strong pregnancy, a comfortable pregnancy, but also to help you prepare for birth. So let's dive into what you can do if you have a late labor stall, plus some ways to prevent them. So the first thing that we can do if we're having any sort of stall that could be related to baby's position or to space within the pelvis is to first look at baby's head positioning. Now, you could have a cervical exam or maybe even some belly palpations to kind of feel what baby's head position is. But if you think baby's a little bit off or you're having that late labor stall, I typically find just doing an inversion is a really great way to help adjust their head position. And sometimes this is all you need to see labor progress. Now, we can do a more intense variation like a forward leaning inversion where you're on an elevated surface and you bring your hands down to a lower surface. You can either do this with like a couch to the floor, or you can do it like on your labor bed. In this position, you would hold it for the duration of your contraction. You'll feel a big stretch kind of in the sacral area. You may feel a big stretch in the round ligament or the front side of the belly area. And you would just breathe and hold here for as long as it's comfortable during the contraction. If you need to come up earlier or your contraction is ended, you're going to extend in the arms and you're going to come back to your starting position and just rest here until the next contraction begins. And we would do this for like 2 to 3 contractions. During this time, you may feel a shift or a change in your labor because maybe it was your baby's head that was a little bit more extended. What may have happened is if baby's head position was a little bit funky, like maybe their head was tilted to the side, also known as asynclitic or cattywampus, or maybe they're just looking straight forward or even extended. Both of these are going to make it just a little bit harder for baby to fit through the pelvis and also to apply pressure to the cervix. So if baby can tuck their chin to their chest, they're going to present much smaller to your vaginal opening and to your pelvis. They're going to fit much better and they're going to apply more pressure to the cervix. So we're going to see labor progress from there. Another option is the puppy pose. So essentially, chest and knees are on the same surface. This is less intense of an inversion variation, but maybe more accessible to you if you're in the later stages of labor. So hips are a little bit more elevated than the chest, and you're just going to hold here for the contraction. You can either come to tabletop in between, or you can stay in this position for 2 to 3 contractions. Since it's less intense, you can usually maintain this position for a little bit longer. And similarly, we would hold here for 2 to 3 contractions or until we felt things shift, and then we would continue with our labor process. Something else that can be really beneficial if you're having a late labor stall is to add a little bit of jiggling, which helps to relax the pelvic floor. One of the things that can contribute towards a late labor stall is tension. So maybe the pelvic floor is clenching, making it harder for baby to move through the pelvis. Maybe it's decreasing pelvic space, so it's kind of keeping that sacrum from being able to move. And so we can add a jiggling technique to help relax the pelvic floor, relax the glute in the legs, to make it easier for things to open. So as you're in this inversion, which is an anti-gravity position, you can use fabric, the bed sheet. I'm using a Rebozo here, and we'll link the company down in the notes below if you want to grab your own. And you're going to place it along the butt so that when you move it, it doesn't slide against the skin. The booty is actually what is going to jiggle. So we'll add a little bit of like a jiggling motion here to help relax the pelvic floor, to stimulate the fascial layers, to help release tension and to release endorphins, which can help you relax a little bit more. So you can either do the jiggling during the contraction, you can just do it in between the contractions, maybe a combination of both. It's all about what feels best for the person that is laboring. Another relaxation technique that we can utilize to help release tension so that we can create more space is going to be a sacrotuberous release. So we have these ligaments that attach to our sacrum, to the pelvis, which could either help the sacrum move or limit its movement. And so I'm going to look for her tailbone and then her sits bone, and in between the two is the sacrotuberous, and that's where I'm going to want to place my hands. So I feel for the sits bone, I feel for the tailbone, and in between those two is the sacrotuberous, and I'm just going to massage in this area. And it feels pretty good. You could also do this with like a lacrosse ball or like a yoga tune-up ball, like a massage ball. And you can feel like maybe one side feels a little bit tighter, this side feels tighter for you. And releasing tension here in this area and the pelvic floor muscles and the ligaments can help to improve how well that sacrum can move. In addition, it's a little bit of a massage, helps to release endorphins, helps with pain relief, and then it can also help to create more space in the bottom part of the pelvis. After we've done our inversion to help baby's head position to see if that corrects the stall, we've done some release techniques with jiggling and massage to help release tension within the pelvic floor and the glute musculature. We can then do some techniques to help create more space in the bottom part of the pelvis, which may help baby finish their rotation. One of the ways that we can do that is with hip shifts. So we are going to start with a partner-supported hip shift, and then we're going to move to some that you can do on your own. And then we'll finish up with a manual technique that can help to release tension as well. That's a little bit more intensive. So for the hip shift, with a partner-supported hip shift, I'm going to place my arm underneath one side so that my knee and the elbow are generally aligned to one another. And then I'm going to bring the knee so that we're forming a 90-degree angle with the thigh to the torso. From here, I'm going to place my hand on the knee. If I want to add a little bit of internal hip rotation, I'll just gently lift the ankle up. And then keeping the knee and the hip on generally the same plane, I'm going to push straight back for a hip shift. And so with the hip shift, this top hip is a little bit further back than the bottom hip, and she should feel a big stretch kind of in this deep glute area. And so this is also a pelvic floor release, and it's also creating more space in the lower mid-pelvis, which could be an area that has some restriction and kind of preventing baby from finishing their rotation. So you would hold here for the contraction, you would release, maybe we add in some jiggling in between, and then we have another contraction. We can come back and apply the hip shift to create a little bit of space, or you can kind of wiggle into it as well. Another way that we can find a hip shift is going to be in a tabletop position. Now, if you have a yoga block just handy in your labor bag, you can utilize it underneath one knee. So you place one knee on it, and then we're going to shift our weight towards the elevated hip. Here you can see that this hip is a little bit higher than this one, and more of her weight is in this leg, and this is going to be our hip shifted position. So this posterior pelvic floor is stretching, and this half of the pelvis, that pubic bone is lifting up a little bit more, so there's more space for baby to finish rotating. If you don't have a yoga block, you can also use a pillow. Either this is a bolster, but you can fold one in half and put it underneath the knee, just so we have like a little bit of elevation, and then you just shift your weight over to create that space. And same thing, we're feeling a big stretch here, kind of in this deep hip pocket area. Another option that I've had a lot of success with is to come into a half lunge position. Sometimes I find when we do like a big movement, it can help to kind of rock baby out of wherever they were kind of stuck. So coming into a half lunge position where one leg is forward and the other is back can sometimes help to create that opening that baby needs. Now in this leg, she can either put a little bit more weight over here to create more space. She can come and shift to this side and create a little bit more space, or rock back and forth in kind of this diagonal movement when she's having a contraction. And then similarly in between, I can come and jiggle in her hips to help relax. I can try to do some of the sacrotuberous releases back here, maybe even some sacral or counter pressure to help her relax in between contractions. But we're trying to physically create more space in the pelvis with this half lunge position. After you've done your inversion, you've done the releases to allow more space to happen, and then we've done some physical techniques to try to create more space to allow baby to rotate under the pubic bone for labor to progress. We can then move into a more advanced technique known as the side lying release. So this is a move from spinning babies, and this helps to create space in the lower mid pelvis where baby is finishing their rotation. It is a little bit more intense of a movement, so it's not my first line of defense. This is going to be more of my last resort, and you would hold this through 3 contractions on each side. So it's a lot, especially if you're unmedicated. With the side lying release, you're going to stand by their hip, and they're going to be fairly close to the edge of the table, about 1 handprint away. So you're pretty much keeping them from rolling off. If you have a hospital bed, there's also kind of this bar here that you can have out so they can hold on to that. I want her shoulders to be aligned, and I want her hips to be stacked. And then this top leg is going to come off the table and then just drop. And I'm here to keep her hips fairly stacked. If they're really, really flexible, they're probably not going to feel much of a stretch during pregnancy. During labor, usually this is just pretty intense for everybody, regardless of your flexibility. So she may feel a stretch more kind of in the glute, into the hamstring area, and we're just going to hold here for the 3 contractions. In the side lying release, there's 2 additional techniques that we can add into it to help. The first is for her to reach overhead, and this is going to bring a little bit of a lat stretch. So I can keep one hand on the hip, and the other hand I can grab onto the arm, and then I'm just going to kind of pull here while applying a little bit of downward pressure on the pelvis. And so this is helping to stretch the lat musculature, which is going to help her find a slightly more rounded position, which then makes it easier to find internal hip and pelvic rotation. Another technique that you can do is as she reaches overhead, you can take your 2 hands and you can kind of apply down pressure onto the pelvis. And this can also help to relax within the hips with that counter pressure technique, and can be helpful if the position is a little bit uncomfortable for somebody by giving them that little bit of counter pressure. In addition, this can also help to create a little bit more space in the bottom part of the pelvis based on where we're kind of pressing. That is our approach if somebody is having a late labor stall. So you're 8 centimeters or you're kind of quote unquote stuck there, or even pushing for a long time and baby's having a hard time finishing that rotation. We can want to address baby's head position to see if maybe the head position is a little bit off with an inversion. We have both the forward-leaning inversion that we can do or the puppy dog inversion that we can do. If you have an epidural, we can also Trendelenburg the bed, where we tilt the bed upside down a little bit so that your baby can adjust their position. After we've looked at baby's position, we can add in some release techniques such as jiggling either during the inversion or afterwards to help release the glute musculature, the legs, and the pelvic floor. We can do some massage techniques like the sacrotuberous release to help release tension around the sacrum to help it move a little bit more easily. And then we can move into some movements that help to create more space in the lower mid-pelvis, particularly hip-shifted exercises. Now, I showed you 2 variations in this video, but there's so many different hip shifts that we can do that are both standing variations in addition to more restorative variations. So if you want to learn more hip shifts, check out our free birth prep circuit where we have 2 hip shifts in there, in addition to our prenatal fitness programs where we have a ton of hip shifted options within the program, which one is going to help you to release tension in your pelvic floor that can help to prevent these late labor stalls. And so when it comes to birth preparation, we want to ensure that we can create space in the bottom part of our pelvis, and this is going to involve rotation of the hip. So every time that you do a single leg exercise, such as a lunge or a step up, when we come down, we're going to think belly comes more towards the thigh as we lower to feel more of a stretch here in the glute musculature. And then exhale, come up and open in the hip. So we feel a little bit more contraction in the glute. So glute feels short with the open hip, and then the glute feels long and stretched with that closed hip. So you can add that into all of your lunges that you do. You can add it into the step-ups that you do, Bulgarian split squats that you do. But when you do single leg exercises, adding in some rotation can really help to create space in the bottom part of your pelvis. In addition, we can incorporate a lot of different hip shifts to help create space in the bottom part of the pelvis. Like I said, we include a lot of them in our prenatal program, where it goes from standing to do your hip shift, being able to switch feet, and then also to integrate some upper body rotation as well. We have an entire workout video on our YouTube channel that is all about avoiding late labor stalls. We incorporate that rotational movement and those hip shifted exercises to help create space in the bottom part of the pelvis, and we'll link that down in the notes below. So hopefully this video was helpful for you to understand what to do if an issue arises during your labor, particularly a late labor stall. Now, we break down a lot more of what to do if there's an issue during your labor in our online childbirth education course. And then our prenatal fitness programs are going to have tons of exercises to hopefully avoid these type of stalls. So check out all of those on our website at MamasteFit.com. You can bundle them together to save 15% off. And you can use our code YouTube10 to get 10% off any of our online offerings, which you can add on to that 15% to get a total savings of 25% off our fitness programs and our online childbirth education course. If you enjoyed this video and you want more videos like this, be sure to subscribe to our channel because we share tons of information helping you to learn the science of birth, what's going on, so that you can have an empowered journey.